Now I will call Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin, Jr. from the Cherokee Nation, member of the ad hoc group for the preparation of the Global Action Plan from USA. Thank you.
Wado, OCO, everyone. I'm very glad to be participating in this meeting. I think the decade of indigenous language is of such incredible importance for not only all of Indian country, but Native peoples around the world and really all nations. This is about something that really goes to the heart of humanity. Keeping our languages alive means keeping our cultures alive. And we all have a stake in that. And we all lose when languages are lost, and we all gain when they are preserved. And that is something that's an important mission here at the Cherokee Nation. Cherokee Nation is the largest tribe by population in the United States, or at least we are sometimes neck and neck with our good friends at the Navajo Nation. But out of our 392,000 citizens, only about 2,000 are left that speak the language. That's a very daunting number that I think about each day, and that helps give some urgency to the efforts that we're making. I'd like to share a little bit about what we're doing at the Cherokee Nation to preserve our language, and share a few recommendations that I think will be helpful here and perhaps in other parts of the world that can be adopted. But I just think this discussion is terribly important. We not only have the statistic of 2,000 speakers left, most of the fluent speakers are over the age of 70. We lose about 15 fluent speakers per month is our best guess. The COVID pandemic, the worst public health crisis for the world in living memory, is something that I think did even more injury to Native peoples, and I can illustrate that with one other number, which is we lost 50 of those 2,000 fluent speakers just to COVID. And I know that any loss of life is tragic, and the life was precious, but when you lose a Native speaker, you have lost a national treasure. You've lost someone that holds in their hearts and their minds something that very few people do. So that is also, I think, given some urgency to our mission to save the Cherokee language. So we're making it a high priority. I want to say briefly that I think Cherokee Nation is one of the most progressive and dynamic governments around. We do a great deal in the field of healthcare and education, business. Our economic portfolio is broadening, and it helps our people. You can look across the spectrum of what we do, and we can be very proud of it. We can think generations ahead, we'll still be proud of it. We'll still be leading in those areas and going into other areas and leading there for our people. But if we lose in that period of time, the next generation or so, the Cherokee language, we will have lost something that goes to the core of our identity, and it will make the rest of those accomplishments, the rest of those great efforts, not meaningless, but with much less meaning, because we will have lost something, again, that's unique to our identity. And I think that's something people across the world share in terms of what is at the core of their identity. Certainly for us, it's our language, and language is indispensable to our culture. At the Cherokee Nation, we've taken some bold steps. We're working every day. The focal point is just an amazing group of men and women in our language department that operate our programs, come up with wonderful ideas, in some ways pioneering ideas. And those of us in leadership try to get behind them with the resources they need to execute on those ideas and to help save the language. So in 2019, I proposed to our council the Durban Feeling Language Preservation Act. Durban Feeling, the greatest advocate of Cherokee language since Sequoyah, the genius from the 19th century who invented the syllabary. Durban Feeling undertook a lifetime of effort in saving the language, spreading the language, and putting us on a path where we have a real shot to save it. So in his name, he passed away last summer. In his name, we enacted a law that will inject $16 million into our language programs. We'll create a language center, one facility where all of our language programs are housed, which is important in terms of the synergy that's created when you get speakers together and you get translators together and you get our immersion school, kindergarten through sixth grade experience where children learn only in Cherokee. And then next door we have built, and soon people will be moving in there, a language village, trying to recreate a Cherokee-speaking community positioned in a way that is strategically located next to this language center, which I think will be one of the most important centers for saving an indigenous language in the world. We're doing that in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, our capital. If we can keep people engaged in the language, make it accessible, make sure there's a space for elders who not only speak the language but can share stories, and it can engage young people as they learn, they navigate their path through our immersion school, and engage adults who are learning in our Master Apprentice Language Program, which is a 2-year program to immerse an adult with the right aptitude and attitude towards the language in an environment where they can be on a path to fluency. If we can pair that with a true language community, which will largely be elder fluent speakers, I think that gives us the best shot at saving our language, because we're creating an environment in which the language is spoken and it's loved and it's used and it's revered. And that's what we ought to be doing. That's what we are doing at this would be a language village. We are also tapping into technology. And some mention of technology. Every computer in the world built today supports the Cherokee language. We work with Microsoft and Apple and Google to make sure that it's accessible through computers, through the internet. Reaching a new generation of Cherokee speakers is the only way we will save this language. At least it's indispensable that we do that, that we use technology. Much of what I've talked about is in the nature of increasing the supply of Cherokee speakers. In any language around the world that's endangered, it's critical that you increase the supply. I can tell you one of the more daunting tasks is how do you increase the demand? Because we've got to create environments in our communities and in our nations where the language is relevant to living your life, to making a living. And so we're investing in the creative arts. We're investing in creating an animation program for children, of which we've had a pilot episode. It's as much about engaging the public through those sorts of means as it is about creating a way for people to make a living. They can make a living teaching. They can make a living in the creative arts. Make a living doing voiceover work. We have to create a situation in which it's sustainable. We generate new speakers through great programs using the most cutting-edge techniques. We also have to make sure that they go out into a world in which their language is relevant and is vibrant. That brings me to some recommendations. We've invested a great deal with the Cherokee Nation, and we're blessed to have the resources to do that. And we've got leadership, of which I'm just a part of, that believes in that mission of saving our language. One of the challenges that we have is closer to home, and this may be the experience of Native peoples in other parts of the world, but we have our immersion school. We work with the state of Oklahoma through a charter school program to operate this school. One of the things that's a bit discouraging is when our kids go to take the state certification test, they spend their entire year learning things in English. I mean, in Cherokee, when they take that test, they're learning it in English. And that's something that we think jurisdictions that do testing in an academic setting should accommodate the native languages. If state leaders and national leaders want to put action behind their words that they believe in our languages and they applaud our efforts, they ought to put action towards that. And one of those actions can be changing policies that honor and show respect and even offer official status to native languages. That thing which may seem symbolic to many people or meaningless to someone working in a bureaucracy can be one of the most meaningful things in the world to a young person learning in the Cherokee in the immersion school and then taking her test in her native language. There's a sense of pride that comes with that, and there's a sense that other people support the mission that we are on. There's other contexts in which Governments can, again, give official status to native languages. Certainly, I hope we've moved away from some of the efforts in this country in which policymakers were pushing some English-only agenda. That's contrary to the idea of saving languages around the world. We need to push back on that and go the opposite direction so that we embrace languages of the world, because we are all in this world together. And if we want to save languages like the Cherokee language, we have to have policymakers that see the world that way. The Cherokee Nation supports that sort of policy. Those are just some of the thoughts that we have on how to help support language preservation. One other thing I'll mention is teaching is so important, and we're trying to develop more teachers of the Cherokee language. Again, we look to the state of Oklahoma to certify those teachers. The state certifies those teachers, but shouldn't it be the native peoples that certify those teachers? Shouldn't the Cherokee Nation, a government that pre-existed the state of Oklahoma, pre-existed the United States, been governing itself just fine from time immemorial, shouldn't we get to certify our teachers and the state recognize that as something that meets its standards such that they are? I think the answer is yes, and those sorts of policies can be in place in other jurisdictions. We certainly are advocating for that here closer to home. Those are some of the ways that other governments can adapt their policies to support native languages. Finally, there's one other effort we undertook, which now seems obvious, but for the longest time we didn't do it. It's to take an actual roll of our speakers. To go out and find the speakers, take a roll. This is the Cherokee Nation doing this, not relying on statistics that other jurisdictions might generate, academic institutions might generate, even if they're accurate. We went out beginning a few years ago to find the native speakers, the Cherokee speakers, and have them sign a roll. That roll is important because it tells us that number 2,000. It tells us this by looking at the ages of the people that we are up against. The strongest foe that the Cherokee Nation has ever had to save our language. We've had a lot of foes. We've had broken treaties. We've had war. We've had sickness. We've had forced removal. The most powerful foe that we have, given what we see on that list, is the passage of time and the fragility of human life. And that is what we are up against now. That is more powerful than any war. It's more powerful than any broken treaty. It's more powerful than any spread of disease. And to save the language, we have to feel the urgency that list ought to instill in every Cherokee leader, and we do. There's one other way that it was helpful in a way that I never anticipated, which is when it came time to protecting our speakers from COVID, making sure they were first in line for COVID tests, making sure we got food out to them, and making sure when we had the vaccine, they were at the front of the line. We had that list. There's all sorts of ways that we can serve our speakers beyond utilizing their expertise to save the language. We ought to be doing something to support the quality of their life. We can do that in the area of healthcare and housing, emergency services, but we have to know where they are. And this list has helped us find where they are. Those sorts of efforts, which seem very obvious and very accessible, that is taking a list of speakers that seems very simple, is something that we need to make sure is done and supported. It could be done on the federal level. It could be done even in a sense on the international level, perhaps aggregating the various roles that we have so we can see what we're up against. And we're all up against the same foe that I mentioned, the passage of time and the fragility of human life is really the great danger to these languages. But we are undertaking great efforts in the Cherokee Nation. I appreciate being able to participate in this on behalf of the Cherokee Nation. This decade of indigenous languages, I cannot overstate the importance of that to indigenous peoples around the world. It's certainly important to the Cherokee Nation. Thank you very much.